Have you ever really, truly stopped to think about why anything exists at all? I mean, we just assume it's the default setting for the universe, right? But what if it's not? What if I told you we're about to explore a framework that says existence is a test, a really strict, continuous test that everything from a tiny particle to a big idea has to pass just to be here?
It's a natural assumption to make, isn't it? That things are just here. But this framework we're digging into, recursive structural invariance, it flips that completely on its head. It suggests that the default state of everything is actually non-existence, and that being here is something that has to be actively, constantly achieved.
And that leads us to the big, central, provocative question that drives this entire idea. What if existence isn't a gift? What if it's a condition that has to be met? A really strict structural test that any system has to pass moment by moment just to keep on existing.
To even begin to answer that, this framework proposes what it calls a primitive rule. Now think of this like the ultimate source code for reality itself. It's not just another law of physics like gravity, it's way more fundamental. It's the law that dictates why there are even laws of physics to begin with.
And okay, this is where it gets really, really wild. The claim is that a single fundamental property defines not just existence, but also what we call coherence, intelligence, and get this, even consciousness. The framework argues these aren't just related ideas, they are, structurally, the exact same thing.
And here it is. I know, that equation looks pretty intimidating, but it is the absolute heart of this whole idea. It basically says that existence, that's the E, is identical to coherence, the C, which is the result of a recursive process, the R, acting on a few key ingredients. Don't worry, we are going to unpack exactly what structural intelligence and the other parts mean, so just stick with me.
Now, before we go any deeper, we have to make a super important distinction. The author is very clear that this is a postulate, okay, not a theory. So think of it like an axiom in geometry. You don't prove the axiom itself, you accept it as a starting point, and then you rigorously test whether the things that follow from it actually match reality. That's what makes this whole idea scientifically testable.
All right, let's pop the hood on this thing and see how the engine really works. We're going to deconstruct that core equation piece by piece so we can really understand the mechanics of what it's saying about existence.
First up, structural intelligence, or SI. And this is critical. This has nothing to do with solving puzzles or learning trivia. Nothing at all. Imagine a house of cards. Its structural intelligence is just its built-in ability to stay standing as you add another card. It's not about behavior. It's all about the inherent capacity of a structure to hold itself together.
And the process that tests that structure is recursion. You can think of it like a story that's constantly rewriting itself to include the very last sentence it just wrote. It's a closed loop where a system is constantly taking its own previous state and baking it into its current one. It's the engine that lets a system maintain a single, continuous thread of who it is through time.
So when that recursive process works, when the story successfully weaves its past into its present without falling apart, the result is coherence. The system holds its identity together. It stays stable, or as the framework puts it, invariant. It doesn't break.
And this, right here, brings us to the final crucial link in the chain. Existence, according to this framework, is simply persistent coherence. If a system can continuously pass the test of holding a structure together through all that recursion, it exists. But if it fails, if it decoheres, it doesn't just break. It structurally, and therefore literally, ceases to exist. Poof.
So now you can see how this leads to that incredible collapse of terms we talked about earlier. It's postulating that existence is coherence, and even more radically, that those mysterious things we call consciousness and intelligence are just different names for the same measurable underlying property, structural intelligence.
Okay, I know this all sounds incredibly abstract, I get it. But here's the thing that makes it a real scientific proposal and not just some cool philosophy. The framework actually lays out a clear path for how this could be tested. Let's see how you'd take this idea from the whiteboard into a lab.
So the proposal gives us this very clear, repeatable experiment called the closed-run protocol. You see it here, right? You define your system, you lock in its starting point, and then you just let the recursion run. At every single step you check, is the core structure holding up? But the absolute key here is step 5. It has to produce the exact same result every single time. This isn't about statistics or probabilities. It's about deterministic black and white proof.
And from that protocol, you get these concrete predictions that can actually be proven wrong, which is the hallmark of good science. These are falsifiable hypotheses. For instance, H2 predicts that when a system fails, it's not a slow decay, it's a sudden catastrophic break. Because existence is binary. It's either passing the test or it's not. There's no dimmer switch. H4 is also wild. It predicts a system can look like it's working fine on the outside, but still be failing the underlying structural test on the inside.
So, let's just imagine for a second. What if we run these tests and the hypotheses hold up? What does a world that's actually governed by this rule look like? Well, let's explore some of those radical implications. This table really draws the battle lines pretty clearly. You know, classical science just assumes existence and treats consciousness like some big mystery. Intelligence is all about behavior. But this framework, it defines existence as a structural test. It makes consciousness a measurable property that's identical to structural intelligence, and it says failure isn't a maybe, it's a clean, deterministic break.
And if this is true, the implications are absolutely staggering. For science, the hard problem of consciousness might not be a problem at all, but a structural property we can actually measure. For engineering, building a secure system isn't about blocking bad behaviors, it's about designing a structure that is so coherent it can't be forced to break. And for civilization, it reframes governance as enforcing a coherent structure, not just a list of rules.
It all comes down to this one: complete reversal of our most fundamental assumption. Existence is not a given. Existence is produced by recursive structural invariance. The universe, in this view, isn't some passive box that things just sit in. It is actively, constantly, running a test that decides what gets to exist and what doesn't.
And that leaves us with one final big question to take away with you. If existence really is this rigorous structural test of maintaining coherence, just look around you, right now. From the device you're watching this on to the ideas swirling in your own mind. What would actually pass the test? And maybe more importantly, what would fail?